We are back with our first roundtable of the summer season. That sounds pretty good, right? First roundtable. If the weather would cooperate, that would be pretty good. Right. Joining me at the roundtable this morning, Democratic political analyst Marianne Marsh and Republican, familiar faces, Republican political analyst Barb Gray. Great to see you guys. Let's start with John Santiago. Obviously, he had the run for mayor a few months, I don't know how long ago back now. It feels like a while ago. That didn't go out well. But his new job, does it best suit his collection? It's a unique set of skills, but it's a collection of skills that he has.
Well, ultimately, he's going to be judged on performance, right? He does have a unique set of skills, many of them applicable to this job as a veteran, a doctor, a state rep who knows his way around state government a bit. All of those things are good. But he's going to be compared to his predecessor. So in that respect, the bar is pretty low. I think the two things people are looking for, you talked about a lot of great programs here. One, the Holyoke Soldiers Home, where 84 veterans died out there because of incompetent management that were political appointees. Chelsea Soldiers Home, those people were living in squalor until early this year, and one of the first things Maura Healey did was remove that person. So, the bar's low, but veterans deserve a lot more. They have plans to provide a lot more. Let's see if they can do it.
Rob, in the form of government, A, does this fit his unique skill set, and B, should his position be a cabinet position?
I'm with Marianne, the perfect resume for this spot, but there are a lot of challenges. And typically, this has not been a power position in the cabinet. So is he able to make the changes that he would like to make that cost money at the soldiers' homes and other places? We'll see. And then, of course, the other interesting point here, it's a political show, is what's next for him? Is he going to run again? Is this something that it's a job he's dedicated to, but is he going to try to use it to step up politically? That's an interesting thing to watch as well.
Yeah, great point.
Right. Next item, Governor Healey has made transparency one of the pillars of her administration, but last week the Boston Globe questioned the use of tax-exempt group that raised money to facilitate her transition to the corner office. The source of those funds remains secret. Now Governor Charlie Baker had a similar fund too. The issue is selective transparency. Will that fly, Rob?
Listen, it smells. It smelled when Charlie Baker did it too. When you start a group like this, you can take unlimited donations, corporate donations, lobbyist donations. It doesn't matter. It's a way to get around campaign finance law. Let's not be polite about it. That's what both of the previous governors did. And, she should disclose who gave to the entity. No question about it.
Marianne?
I mean, to Rob's point, her predecessors did the same thing, and there was no fallout with voters.
Right.
And that's the equation here. Does it look great? No. But there's no political fallout. And money like that used to be a big deal, but it's not with voters anymore.
I think you're right. I mean, there's probably not going to be a price to pay, but she set the bar high on transparency with freedom of information and other things. So she's going to be measured against that bar.
At what point in life is the answer not, well, he did it before I did, so therefore, at what point in life is it, I've done it, I've elected to go this way, or I'm not going to go this way? At what point does it not ring back to a predecessor?
I think the voters are going to tell us that. And again, over time, in our lifetime, we both used to go after each other's our former clients, candidates and all that. You took money from this one, you did that, you did this for that. That just doesn't ring the way it used to. I'm not saying it's right. But it just doesn't work.
Campaign finance and the MBTA. Always point to the last guy or the last woman, right?
We talked about this just as we headed to break. The cost to rent a home in Massachusetts, just to rent, is the third highest in America. You need to earn more than $40 an hour. Maybe you need $40,000 an hour, $40 an hour to afford a typical two-bedroom apartment. That is a household income of $86,000 a year to rent. The average cost of a single-family home is over $500,000. Last week, Governor Healey unveiled a 4-year capital plan that would devote billions to housing initiatives. Time is not on her side. Marianne, will she be willing to step on some well-funded toes to get things done?
Yet another problem that was years in the making, and here we are. Maura Healey, Michelle Wu, every mayor, every city and town manager knows they need more housing. And so what they're all doing is using buildings and land they already own to build on it, to get around some of those problems, and using all the leverage they have. So everyone's putting a lot of money, time, and effort into it. It's going to take some time, though.
Time.
I remember Mitt Romney talking about this when he was governor 20 years ago.
Right.
Transit-oriented development and housing around MBTA sites. I mean, a lot of governors have been talking about it for a long time. You know, they've thrown pebbles in the pond. Let's see if Maura Healey's is more of a boulder.
To that very specific point, the town that I live in, I live in a town, they're in the same phase of building housing within a half a mile of the T stops. There are 3 of them in the town I live in.
I think a lot of it is the market, right?
Yeah.
And there's only so much government can do. The market, interest rates. Now with COVID and people working from home, people can live farther out and not have that commute into Boston. And so that's the solution for many people, is to move farther out.
But start with the things you can control, not the people you have to fight with.
Yeah. Good point. All right, we just passed the anniversary of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. Some 15 states in the union have ceased nearly all abortion services since the ruling. It has made the red state blue state divide even deeper. But Rob, is it going to be the issue, or or will it be an issue in the presidential race in 2024?
It's front and center now. No question, it's a huge political issue. Now, 17 months from now, we're in June 2023.
Right.
Who knows? I mean, if you took the track record of people who predicted 17 months out what the top issue in a political race or presidential campaign was going to be, let alone the top 3, you know, the track record is pretty poor.
Marianne?
I'm going to be that person. Abortion's going to be the #1 issue for women and young voters in the presidential election. It will deliver the White House, the Senate, and the House to Democrats. And here's why. We already know that issue converts red states to blue states. Look at Kansas, where when regular voters get to vote and not gerrymandered legislators voting on these issues in the legislature, then pro-abortion policies win. Same thing in Wisconsin. You know, Kansas was 20 points, Wisconsin 19 points by electing a Supreme Court judge who said she would protect abortion rights. It is a winning issue, and the Republicans are on the wrong side of it.
So you could be right. You could be right, but it depends on the candidates and it depends on the economy.
Save
we'll
the
see.
video.
Yeah.
We will.